Welcome to She's a Full-On Monet, a digital lifestyle magazine for women. Every week, our editor-in-chief, Kelly Castillo, along with Megan Block and special guests, participate in a deep dive discussion about recent articles and topics we have covered. We invite you to become part of our community where everyone's welcome. You can totally sit with us.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to She's a Full-On Monet. I am your host, Kelly, and I have with me Megan.
Hello. Hi.
Hi. Sorry, just trying to get comfy. I know.
I haven't seen you in a minute.
Been a minute. Yeah. We've been a little inconsistent. It was very nice. Thank you for asking. I was away for a few weeks, so thank you guys for your patience. I am back on track.
Yes. You've had some fun things happen since we've spoken. So
yeah, I'm happy. I'm a very busy time of my life right now, but it's all good. It's all good things.
Yeah. You still have, is it still a full house? You still have all the dogs and all the people?
No, Gabby left on Friday back to New York with her dog.
Oh, so, no, the noodle. He's gone.
The noodle is gone. The house is pretty quiet now.
How drastically different that must feel, the sound, because you get used to it for a second and then it goes away and you're like, wow.
Yeah. And he's particularly noisy. So it's weird. It's quiet here, but it's good.
Yeah.
Well, so today we wanted to talk, I know, we do a lot of topics that are mental health related. I think that's a subject that speaks to both of us and probably speaks to just about everybody listening as well. If you don't struggle with mental health issues, you definitely know somebody who does. You have a loved one, family member that does. And we've covered anxiety. We've covered negative self-talk. We've covered lots of topics on this. I feel like
of topics. I cover it.
Mom honestly, guilt.
If you don't have a mental health issue, I'd love to meet you because how did you do it? How did you make it through the last 2 years without coming out of it with something? Anyway, yeah, no, it's a topic that is so wide, right? There's so many things you can touch on when it comes to mental health, but sometimes these topics get very. It's like a plane. I'm sorry.
Yeah, it's okay.
So anyway,
no big deal.
Right away. That sometimes mental health can come and get to a very dark place, and it's like how to handle those moments, and it's sometimes those are the topics that people don't really like to talk about because they're very, very dark and uncomfortable for people,
Yeah, I think there's a big shame component to talking about some of these darker aspects of mental health issues that keep people from reaching out and from asking for help or to even telling people what's going on with them. And I think the more we talk about it openly and discuss what ourselves and our loved ones are going through, then we normalize it and we take some of that stigma away. So
also I've seen a lot of shift on television shows and movies and stuff like that and how they depict people and mental health all around. I was off camera, I was talking about Euphoria, they talk a lot about mental health and that. I just feel like the more we normalize it on what the younger generation is seeing, the less taboo it feels to talk about it. And the more we can get into the darker aspects because it's feeling more and more normal, Yeah.
I mean, I know we've talked about this on here before, but when I was in high school, obviously that was a really long time ago. There were no discussion amongst my friend group or anyone I knew about having anxiety or depression or any mental health issues at all. It was just never discussed. It wasn't something that I even knew was a topic that, was an issue. And it definitely wasn't discussed in the school curriculum or in counselors' offices. And I don't remember really seeing much about it on after school specials. There was some eating disorder coverage a little bit. Are you being abused at home kind of coverage, but nobody was talking about are you having intrusive thoughts? Are you feeling anxious? Are you anything? And people were still using a lot of the kind of buzzwords as, people say, oh, I'm so OCD. Well, that they didn't actually mean that they have OCD. They meant that they are kind of type A, but using it as a slang term like that was very common.
Yes. I remember going to therapy in elementary school because my parents were going through some stuff and they thought I also needed to go to therapy. I bit my nails a lot, but I just remember going to therapy and getting taken out of class And I remember having to feel the need to make up a new reason why I was getting taken out of class because I felt embarrassed I was going to therapy. Like it wasn't, I never wanted any of my friends to think there was something like wrong with me, when honestly, there was a lot wrong going on.
Right. I mean,
I'm sure they were going on too, but like, I remember I needed to get taken out of school because that was the time that my appointment was, but I never, ever, ever told anyone why I was getting taken out. Like I would have rather died than have anyone know I was going to therapy as a kid.
And I remember a lot of my friends in middle school and high school were going through some pretty major stuff. Parents getting divorced, or one of my friends, her older sister got hit by a car and passed away. And we were like, oh, how are you doing? And she's like, oh, it sucks. Like, let's go get ice cream. I'm like, there was no discussion about feelings or trauma or none of that. Like none.
Yeah. It was like uncomfortable, icky feelings. And now we're like, now I feel like we're in a place where our children can be more and more aware and comfortable with their feelings and have some source, whether it's us or elsewhere, to talk to. So I'm glad we've come this far. But I still feel like we're going to talk about, there's some deeper aspects of mental health and thoughts that can become very dark and scary, that even then people, it's like no one really, unless you're like a trained professional, is able to handle that. I'm sure if any of my friends or loved ones were to come at me with those things, like I wouldn't be like fully equipped to handle it the perfect way. But, I'm hoping that my loved ones, like my, 10-year-old daughter, if she were to have some sort of issue, she would feel comfortable no matter how deep or dark or scary it is, that she could come to me for it,
Yeah, that's what you want to be as open and accepting as you can be, so that there is the feeling that, you're the person that people can talk to, whether that's a close friend or one of your children or your partner or whatever, because we really never know what's going on in other people's minds unless they tell us.
Absolutely. Yeah. There's a lot of masking, a lot of sadness going on in people's life, And so that's why I always try and remember that when I'm going through something really heavy. And as parents, like, you could be going through something really heavy in your personal life, but you still need to go get groceries, or you still need to get that Target pickup, or you still need to take your kid to the play date. You need to like mask this smile. That is always such a humbling experience, because it reminds me that there are probably so many people I run into on a daily basis that are doing that exact same thing at that moment. And we always should just walk into every situation with kindness, because mental health is so universal now. And it's, unfortunately being masked because we have no choice but to move forward and go, And so it's hard, but.
Well, and I think as moms, no matter what we're dealing with our own mental struggles or struggles in our lives, like job insecurity, relationship problems, sickness, illness, things like that. I mean, depending on the ages of your children, it's really something that we try to protect them from. It's not, a burden that you want to affect their childhood, even if it's, a serious medical diagnosis or a divorce or something like that. You really kind of want to shield them from whatever you're feeling as much as you can, which means that you don't get to process your own feelings until everybody's asleep in a bed at night. And then you get to, cry it out over ice cream. I don't know exactly what each person's thing is.
It's really hard. But at the same time, we all just have the same universal hope that we don't like become the reason that they are fucked up when they're older. We're like, I just don't want to fuck you up with my problems right now. But honestly, to be transparent, like this happened to me yesterday, where I was going through something in my relationship that was really heavy and I was having a hard time functioning. And I had my kids with me 24/7, and I was trying to mask it all day. But I mean, man, I'm a human. And at one point I looked at my oldest daughter and was like, I'm sorry, I'm really upset right now. And I had to let her know that I was upset so I could give myself permission to feel and cry.
Well, and that's the thing.
It was going to come, and I didn't want her to be like, what just happened? But I also was like, I don't want to burden her with adult issues, but also I was like, it's coming. I got to say something. So yeah, it's really hard.
And we think that we're so good at masking.
We're not.
Our kids pick up on things. And if we don't even offer them the excuse of, you know what, mommy's having a really rough day today. And so is that okay if we just watch cartoons and mommy just kind of, checks out for me?
Yeah.
If we don't say something, then kids, it's their nature to think that everything is about them. They're
Absolutely
very self-absorbed little beings. So they're going to think, I'm the cause of this. This is me that is causing this upset in the house, because that's how they process information. And that, can cause a lot of other issues.
Damage, right? We're all just trying not to damage them. That's all.
Right.
And then other things in our life happen, and it's like, but I'm allowed to be a human and have feelings and cry, but apparently not from 7 a.m. to 8 p.m.
Nope. You're not. Yeah, you got to be a super mom.
Yeah.
Because you don't want your kids in therapy someday to be like, remember that year in 4th grade when mom didn't come out of her room all year?
Oh my gosh. Honestly. And that's the worst part about my mom not being around anymore. Because there are so many moments where I'm like, girl, I'm so sorry. Or I'm just sitting here remembering a part of my childhood, because we had my parents had issues. Right. And so remembering all the times that like, I was never like, I wonder how much she did shield us from, and how much she masked, and how much she pushed forward. And I was never able to fully understand that until I was in this position. And now she's like, like it's a bitch.
I remember when I was a little kid, my dad took my sister and I, he just showed up one day with a motorhome from one of his clients, because he was in the recreational vehicle industry. So he had a brand new motorhome from Fleetwood, and he was like, we're going on a road trip. So we spent weeks like crisscrossing the US on this motorhome. And later it came about that he did that because he was getting divorced from one of my stepmothers, and he was taking us away so that she could clean her stuff out of the house and not have any drama or anything affecting us. But we were terribly behaved on that trip. I remember.
Oh my gosh.
Hyper as all hell, and bouncing off the walls and wanting to stop at every Dairy Queen we saw and all of that. And he was going through the breakup of a 7-year relationship.
Oh my
and he
gosh.
didn't say a word, didn't say anything. I mean, I can't even imagine like how he was processing that information and those feelings. Like when we were off bike riding, or when we were asleep, or when.
Yeah, you really don't know. And it's like, thank goodness for people like that, because I mean, my mom and dad were great parents, but my mom did expose us to a little bit too much of adult side of life too soon. And she didn't do the best at masking everything. And I'm just like, dang, I would have wished that it was masked by something like a motorhome trip. Like, you know what I mean? Like,
right. And it's so funny because I have great memories of that trip, and I had so much fun with my sister. And I remember how happy I was just to have my dad to myself without, like the stepmother around. And he was obviously having a very different trip than we were. So it's interesting to me how I didn't pick up on that as a kid. And then we came, there was no cell phones either. So there was no reaching us, right, for these weeks.
The perception of children is so self-absorbed, and it's totally okay, because it comes from the most innocent perspective. But it's like, you don't really know what's the mental anguish that parents can be going through until you're in that moment yourself, and you're like, wow, like they put a lot aside to make sure that I was okay.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
But, the topic for today, we're going to talk about intrusive thoughts, and that is obviously a heavy topic. And I think this is probably one of the mental health issues that is the least spoken about in media or between people. I know it probably comes with the most judgment, because if you don't have those type of thoughts, sharing, and someone shares with you that they're having them, it's really hard not to react, because they are so obviously they're called intrusive because they're intrusive. So,
well, also because a lot of really extreme, violent acts of horribleness in our world and in our news have come from somebody starting with some sort of intrusive thought, right? So you automatically connect the two, and it's not fair, So you never want to share those with people, because you don't want people to start to go like, oh my God, should I alert?
Right.
And alert the authorities? Like, no.
Watching you out of the side of their eye, waiting to see if you're going to do something, off the rails. But if you don't speak to somebody about it, even a professional, like that's how those intrusive thoughts pile up. If you can't figure out a way to navigate through them. And I think it is with any negative thought, intrusive thought, unwanted thought. The the only option at the moment, until you work out where, if there's a place they might be coming from, if there's some kind of unhealed trauma, or I don't know, I'm not a psychologist, obviously, is the only thing that you can do, and at least to my knowledge, is to distract yourself and redirect your thoughts.
Absolutely.
Which sounds super simple, but obviously it's not. It never is.
Yeah. I mean, as someone who has, I'll admit I've had intrusive thoughts of all kinds, like all levels of holy moly to like, that's understandable. Like, for instance, when you're in a fight with your spouse, right? And they're saying some things that are not cool. And in your mind, you're like punching them in the face, but you're smiling as they're talking. But in your mind, they're getting their ass beat, right? That's a level of intrusive thought that I'm like, you know what? Sorry, not sorry for that. But then there's other ones where you're just like, where you're having such a bad day, right? And you're driving and you're like, what if I just like kept driving into this lake, and you're like, what the heck am I? You have to snap yourself out of it,
Yeah.
But you have to know that sometimes like people could use those as a way of control. When you feel like you can't control the situation in your mind, that is a place that is fully to your understanding, you're a place of your control. So in your mind, you can have all sorts of scenarios happen, and they're only in your mind. It's when you act on them or do something about it, or those start to manifest into, this is what I must do, that becomes a really unsafe space to be. I mean, it's
and I think that's
as a pastime for anybody, but I'm saying like, I could see how in some moments those thoughts can be not therapeutic, but in a way where you cannot control them.
I think that's an important distinction, because we need to normalize the fact that a lot of people every day, normal life, have those kinds of thoughts, and without any intention to, or, even plan or anything to act on them. They're just having a thought and then they dismiss it pretty much immediately. And even if that thought is repetitive, it's a different thing. We need to make that distinction between someone who is having having intrusive thoughts, or having a plan to do something related to an intrusive thought. That's a different category.
Yeah. It's like, you've seen the movie Office Space, right? It's like when he fake hit the printer with the bat versus the guy who with the red stapler who legit lit the place on fire. Like, he kept saying over and over, I'm going to light this place on fire. No, he did. Right. Versus like thinking in your head, like beating your boss up because he's like, treated you like crap for the last 2 years every single day. And that's just the only way you can get through your work day, but it just becomes this fight of like, how do I turn it around and not make it become like a plan of action, or like I'm justifying it in my head because over and over I'm playing this scenario. I'm now slowly justifying this action as okay, Yeah.
And I think, trying to see if there's a place in your mind where you can see that it trails back to. I know for me, when I've had intrusive thoughts, which for me are usually like, I'm driving and I'm thinking, I'm just going to keep driving until I get to Mexico or Canada, and I'm never coming back to my home. That's a thought that I have. I've never actually continued to drive. Obviously, I pull in my driveway, but I've had those thoughts. Like, how long would it take me if I just kept driving?
Yeah.
And left my family
I feel like
behind.
intrusive thoughts come in moments of exhaustion and of desperation. Like, think of a brand new mom who has a newborn baby who has colic or whatever, who just cannot stop crying. And like, you have these really intrusive thoughts of like harm, and that like those are moments when I'm hoping your brain will convert it to, I need help.
I've also
converting it to, I just need a nap because you just want to keep driving.
Right. And those moments of me wanting to keep driving is when I'm really overwhelmed.
Yeah.
When I have too much on my plate and I feel really overwhelmed, like there's no hope for me getting it all done. Mm-hmm. That's where that comes from. And I can usually talk myself down from that ledge. But I remember, this is a really good example. When I had my second son, so I had an 18-month-old and a newborn, and the newborn Colin had really bad colic and cried pretty much nonstop from about 5:30 p.m. until about 8 in the morning,
like
every night, every night. And I was doing it mostly on my own. And I remember a couple of nights where I felt this compulsion or intrusive thought to like shake him.
Yes.
To get him to stop crying.
Yes.
And then I would put him in his bassinet and I would go, and we had an old house. It was not, newfangled house. And I would turn on the exhaust fan in the bathroom because it was really rattly and noisy. And those old like 60s, 1960s, 1950s exhaust fan. I would go in the bathroom and close the door and turn on the exhaust fan just so I couldn't hear him for a minute. Yeah. And I would just take a bunch of deep breaths and just sit with that white noise until I was ready to go back. I knew he was safe. He was in his bassinet. And until
you just couldn't hear. It was,
it was because it was constant. Yeah. The crying was constant. There was, it wasn't like he cried and then settled.
To any non-parents out there, that is like such like it irks us and pains us to our like bones. Like we're attached to this feeling that there's nothing more important than calming your baby. So if you're doing this for hours on end,
that's the thing.
You can relax and go have a beer in the garage. You can't.
If you have never, if you're not a mom, especially one who actually like physically created your own child, because there's lots of paths to motherhood. But this is a distinction. When you carry a baby and birth it, you have a biological reaction to its cry. I did not have that same reaction to the cry of a baby like next door or whatever, the table next to me. Mm-hmm. Something about your particular baby's cry, your body physically reacts to it.
If you're nauseous,
it makes you nauseous. If you're breastfeeding, your breasts will swell. You get almost like short of breath, and it's like a panic attack. You have to stop the crying immediately.
Yes. And if there's nothing that will work, it's like you're. That's why that shaking babies
happens.
It happens not because they're evil people, but because like that's what that's your body's physical reaction to this torture that you
At the time, I wasn't napping because I had an 18-month-old. They weren't on the same sleep schedule. I wasn't getting any sleep. I wasn't eating enough. Ellie. And
you were running on empty.
I was running on empty and I couldn't soothe him. So there were all these feelings of like, I'm a shitty mom.
You just want it to stop.
I can't make my baby happy. And I was very young too. At the time I was, 19. I was also thinking, oh my God, what's wrong with my baby? Like, what am I doing wrong? If I was a more capable parent, like get him to stop crying. So there's so many parts of the puzzle that add up to that level of frustration where you have those intrusive thoughts. I mean, I would never, just for the record, I would never have acted on them. I knew exactly what to do when that happened.
You knew to stop. But I mean, like, that's an intrusive thought. The most thing we love most on this planet.
Yes.
For a millisecond, in a moment of just survival, our brains can just go there, right? And it's
and I felt like it was like I've tried everything else, and it got to the point where I actually called my grandmother and I made an arrangement with her where we switched off, so she would come and watch the boys for me a couple of nights a week, and to sit up with him all night and rock him in the rocking chair so that I could sleep, because the sleep deprivation was causing so many mental health issues for me. And once I got some relief, I was fine.
Yeah.
But at that moment, I mean, that could have obviously ended really badly, as it has for many parents. And I'm sure, having the intrusive thought to acting on it and the immediate regret, I can't even imagine.
No, because neither one of my kids were diagnosed with colic, but I mean, there were certain points, maybe just me being a first time mom, where there was just no amount of anything I was doing that was getting her to go to sleep. And all those thoughts came in, and I was just like, every single time I had the mental flex to put her down and go into a room and go into a bathroom, my immediate thought was, holy crap, what if I did, because it's just, never want to be put in that position. No, I can't even think about it. It's because even in those moments where all you want to do is just like the worst to this crying thing that you're attached to, you also have this equal, if not more, need to protect it from all things. And it's just this most bizarre torture in the world. I hate the infant stage.
Yeah. I mean, and it happens, when the kids are toddlers, especially if, we practiced gentle parenting in our house, which sounds great on the surface until you have a toddler who is sassy as hell and mouthy and not listening. And you're trying to do the gentle parenting thing. And you really just like, you're like, man,
raising
this
a
was
thug.
my parents would have whooped you, you know?
Oh my gosh.
You're like, I'm going to spank you. And they don't even know what that means because you've never even like you're such a gentle parent. They don't know what spanking even is.
Yeah. Because even in the gentle parenting stage, you're like, am I letting them walk all over me? Is this is the reason that they are this way because of the gentle parenting?
You rethink everything. And then you're like, oh, maybe I should just swing the pendulum in the total opposite direction and just spank their little butt.
Let's just say intrusive thoughts come as a side effect of parenting. And it starts right at birth and it goes all the way to be TBD, right? Because you're just like, sometimes you're just like, oh my gosh, but some people's, they might live in, say, like an abusive situation where they come home to a place that is not good, or they see their dad or mom get abused or whatever, and so they think about doing something to that person. It's an intrusive thought, but it's like a form of control, right?
Yeah,
that's what I see it as. I feel it as like, I can't control this situation, so I'm going to control this in my head.
And I mean, we've been talking a lot about intrusive thoughts in parenting, but there are intrusive thoughts in relationships as well. I mean, I know a lot of my friends we're open to share some things with each other and some really deep things. And I know this has been a topic that's come up in my like mom friend group about having like intimate thoughts about an inappropriate person. Like if you have intimate dreams or thoughts randomly about your husband's best friend or like your best friend's husband or someone super inappropriate that you would never, ever, ever, but it just happens. And then you're like, oh my gosh, what's wrong with me? Why am I thinking like that? I'm not even attracted to that person. Something is like seriously wrong in my brain. And that's totally normal. I think that has happened to everybody in their life where they, had some kind of weird dream about someone. And then you're like, where did that come from?
One of those WTF moments.
Yeah.
Like, where did that go? And it just happened to be because that's how the brain works. And that was the last person that talked to you or the last person you emailed or like whatever. It's nothing to do with anything, but you're like, what just happened there?
You're like, who knows where that came from? But like, thinking those thoughts about Pastor John or whatever, like we will never speak of this because it's not a genuine, obviously it's not a genuine attraction. It's not something that you would act on. It's just a weird, mind connection thing that happened. Whoever, like you said, whoever you were last thinking about.
Yeah. It's just, or the movie like that you last, I was like, it always happens to be in the scene of that movie, right? Yeah. It's super bizarre and weird. Or like a boyfriend you haven't thought of in 20 years and you're like, all of a sudden they show up and you're like, what? Yeah. But it's like, at what point do intrusive thoughts become something you need to like be on the red alert about? The consistency of it, starting to actually think about doing it.
I mean, I think obviously distracting yourself.
Talk to somebody about, because having the thoughts are one thing, but then having the thoughts consistently where it's just becomes a form of therapy can't be a healthy way to handle any issue you may have going on in your life.
I think when you have a thought now and then, that's a totally normal thing that it happens to most people probably. But when you start to expand it into a whole scenario, or a whole like fantasy scenario. And you're playing it out rather than having a thought and going, oh, that's a weird thought. Like we're going to stop that. We're going to think about something else, or giving yourself the break that you need if it's from, just overwhelming issues, something like that. But when you actually start creating in your mind, like playing a movie of the whole scenario, because that's where you start to get comfortable.
Yes.
Right. Before, there's always a moment where you make a decision to do something, but usually before that, at least when I've done things I super terribly regret, I've started playing out the scenario in my head and kind of getting myself normalized with it, before I acted on it. And that's probably where, it's already gone too far and you need to talk to somebody about it, even if it's just a friend you trust or somebody that can tell you you're out of mind. Don't do that. That's very, very bad.
Yeah. I mean, honestly, that's probably the best way to handle it, because and the person you tell has to be able to fully trust that you're not going to go and do what it is you say you're going to do, because you definitely don't want to open up a can of worms of somebody to be alarmed or alert about something that won't actually happen.
Yeah, because sometimes the thoughts, especially if they're repeated, like plant seeds in your head of what's possible. So if you work, like, say you're a bank teller or something, and you start thinking, well, if I just put this money in my pocket, and you're like, I would never do that, obviously. And then you start to really like imagine yourself doing it, what you would buy with it, how you would get away with it. And you expand it until it seems like a very likely possible scenario. It doesn't seem so crazy as it did the first time you said it. I think that's how every, at least every like caper movie, that's how they start, right? That's how they start. Yep. But I think when you start to formulate any type of plan, you definitely, especially if your intrusive thoughts have anything to do with like self-harm or harming others. Obviously, I don't feel like we need to say that, but we will again.
No, really though.
Those are,
if you're a single mom of like 5 kids, sometimes the thought of just taking that van with all of the kids right into the lake has happened, So if you start to daydream about that idea, look into some help as far as like getting, like you said, that help from your grandma was a game changer when it came to being able to be present and, the best person you can possibly be. So if you notice that that's just like life's way of telling you to like, you need help, and that's totally okay to not be able to do everything on your own, or you might just be really overwhelmed. If that comes in moments, like I said, of desperation or just sleep deprivation or all the crazy, it's like when you being out in the desert and then you start to notice like a island out of nowhere. No, you're just getting desperate because you're almost dead. You know what I mean? Like we start to normalize the radical when we're in this moment of like almost like fight or flight, So just see that as a sign that you need to get some help, whatever.
Yeah. And whatever topic, your thoughts take or go towards, that is a sign that there might be, I think it's worth exploring. Is there some kind of root to where this is coming from, like exhaustion? Am I having these thoughts about someone other than my partner because I have a dissatisfaction or an issue that I haven't addressed with that person? Or am I having these thoughts at my workplace because I feel underappreciated, or I'm overloaded with work I'm not being paid enough to do? Things like, if you find a root cause of it, you may be able to get ahead of it without absolutely needing anything else. But we all have, anyone who's had a thought, especially like the ones you were talking about, has immediately thought, I would never do that. But we've all heard stories of parents who did, and I'm sure they also thought that. So at least in the beginning. So you definitely, have to understand what is what's rational and what's logical and what's, not. And sometimes that requires a professional to walk you through that. Because sometimes these thoughts come from very misguided notions or a deeper mental health issue, like, paranoia or psychosis or things like that. That can happen just from a chemical imbalance. It can happen from changing medications. It can happen from combining medications. There are lots of reasons why, it may be a step farther than just having an intrusive thought.
Yeah, because there are ways to, it sounds like, everyone is, to me, I feel like has had some form of intrusive thought at some point in their life, whether it's like crazy bizarre or like something very small. But no matter what it is, you're going through something and it sounds like a prison and it just sounds really sad. And so make sure that, you're taking care of yourself, and that's the person you have to go to bed with and wake up with every single day. And if you're having these thoughts, that's your mind's way of calling out for help. There could be, like you said, some sort of imbalance, and there's ways to help with that. There's things that you can do and take, and whatever path you choose. But, don't feel like this is who I am and I'm messed up and I have to do it alone. And this is just the way I'm wired. No, there are there are avenues where you can be helped and ways that you can be not like it can be regulated, but those thoughts can become less intrusive and you'll feel less like an alien in your own body. Because, the minute you have it, you're like, a little form of you is like, what is wrong with me for even thinking that? And so
and that's where the shame comes in, where you don't want to share it with anybody else.
And if it happens a lot, then you feel like there is literally something wrong with me. And I'm like, I'm almost like not safe to society, or not safe to my family, or not safe to the world. And I'm wrong. No, there are so many ways that you can be helped, to where you don't feel like, well, you'll feel a lot better within yourself.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. And I think the relief that you will feel if you're able to get through it and come out on the other side, and you'll feel so much relief, and so grateful that, it didn't get to the point where you acted on any of those thoughts, because it is a brave thing to ask for help or to share those kinds of issues with people you're close to, because you do kind of expect them to react badly. Or not know what to say, or, there's a lot of, like you said, what's wrong with me kind of attitude.
What do you do about intrusive thoughts with children? Like if you notice that they're maybe writing some insane journal entries, or drawing some crazy pictures, or sharing some dreams that they have, or sharing some ideas or thoughts that they have that become of concern.
Yeah. And I think we have to consider what is appropriate for the age, because I think every very young child has much more of these types of thoughts than
vivid
adult people do. And no long-term thinking, right?
Yeah.
So if they think, oh, I want to feed baby sister to, the dog. Because there is no long-term thinking that that's permanent, or that, whatever it is.
Right.
But I think it's talking to them openly, where they can share that stuff with you without feeling the shame and the guilt, or that they are, having no reaction at first, and asking them more probing questions and trying to get around it and telling them that's normal. That's obviously the first part. So that they do feel comfortable sharing with you, and trying not to freak out. Like if, your kid says, I'm going to take my baby brother and leave him in the woods tomorrow. Be like, wow, that's why do you want to do that? What happened? Because I think that is something that comes along with childhood, or drawing pictures about, like, my kids have drawn some pretty crazy violent pictures when they were little. And be like, I think if my kids were a little bit stronger and had better use of their thumbs and stuff when they were babies, I think they would have murdered each other or me, because they're toddlers are violent, and they don't know anything about permanency. They will literally whack you over the head with a cast iron skillet if they can pick it up.
Yep.
So I don't know how many times I've been headbutted.
Yeah.
Gabby used to put
are thugs.
They're violent. Gabby used to put her little teeny tiny hands on my throat, and I'm like, girl, you can't. Like, you're not strong enough. You're trying to murder me, but it's not going to work. And now she's like the most gentle person. It was like, she can't have a 7th bag of Welch's fruit snacks, so she's going to try to strangle me with her tiny baby hand.
So the accuracy in that is so true. Yeah.
But yeah, if they're
take it too seriously, but if you notice that, like, they are, like they're in pain, like
there's an age where they grow out of that,
where they have these thoughts, and they start to feel like there might be something wrong with them because they're having these thoughts, not like, oh, dad can jump out of an airplane, not at 5. I'm talking about, like, when they start to go 10, 11, 12, 13 towards like teenage years, when it becomes like, like I'm having these very extreme thoughts to these scenarios, where people would be like, I would stop here. I'm going to continue and keep going on, like,
I don't know if you watched this season of Stranger Things, but when 11 hit the girl with the roller skate, that was an intrusive thought that she acted on. So
you go.
We don't want to hit people in the face with roller skates.
Yeah. So it's, it's also watching ourselves, but as always, because that's what we do as parents, watching our children and seeing if they are starting to form some sort of, mental prison themselves, because like they're not going to maybe feel so comfortable sharing because they're going to worry that they might be worrying you.
And the reason that we see so high of like suicide rates and things like that with children, particularly teenagers, there's an impulsiveness that most people grow out of. And again, that long-term problem solving doesn't exist. Their brain literally can't process information like that. Everything seems so urgent right now. And there is no sense of permanency to decisions. That's why teenagers make such poor decisions generally. I mean, they just don't understand the long-term ramifications of some of the things that they do. So having conversations about mental health in the home is so incredibly important. Having conversations about impulse control and how emotions are not reality, and how, sometimes what your body is feeling and what your mind is telling you doesn't line up with logic or reality. And we have to kind of be able to understand those differences to be able to talk us out of having overreactions to things. And I mean, that takes practice.
Absolutely. Maturity and all those things, so you can't count on them to do it alone.
Yeah. Giving yourself space between an action and your reaction to it, even if it's just counting to 10 or, sleeping on it or stepping away for a moment, like going for a walk, coming back, whatever it is. That's a great skill to teach children regardless, because impulsive reactions are almost never the correct reactions.
No.
And letting kids have, because their brains aren't wired to do that as quickly, letting them have that space to process and think things through. Usually, I think on their own, they will come up with a better decision than they would have impulsively.
You got to let them try and problem solve a little bit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's the same thing. And then just, obviously being involved in their lives and their friendships and monitoring them. I mean, I'm not saying you need to wire up your kids' room with hidden speakers and stuff, but like at least knowing a little bit about what's going on in their friend group and at school, and being aware, because then you can catch things earlier, whether it's bullying or, inappropriate behavior with other children or whatever it is. A lot of times those things can be caught way earlier before they become real problems.
Absolutely.
By just being a little bit of a snoopy.
Just being in the know, right?
A little bit nosy.
You should know at least who your kids are hanging out with and who their friends are, and kind of like what they like to do,
Yeah.
Like,
and I mean,
kids a general idea of my friends, my kids' friends.
Kids have an inherent right to privacy. Obviously they do, for their own bodies and their own thoughts and those kinds of things, but they don't have such a right to privacy that we can't track their locations and double check who they're texting and what kind of photos they're sending back and forth to each other, and making sure that things stay appropriate.
We're genuinely interested. No, we don't care. We just want to make sure you're safe. Like, we would rather be at a spa right now, but you went to the movies and I have to know where you are because I've seen too many crimes shows to know what could happen. Like, it's never because I care about what you're doing. Like, and when I was a kid, I was like, why does my mom care so much? Like, why does she need to know? Like,
yeah, it's like, I'm not
life. I'm like, now
I'm not judging. I'm not judging your selfies. I'm trying to make sure you're not sending nudes to some 40-year-old man.
But honestly, they think we genuinely are interested. We're not.
Yeah.
We're just trying to keep them alive to see the voting age, and then the drinking age, and then the age in which we are talking right now, where we're like, see, told you so, like, yeah. It's funny how that works. So yeah, you do have a right to some sort of idea of what's going on. Location is a good one. Friend circle, because if you're not enough in the know, then they're not going to feel like they have an ally in you anyway. And you're just going to be so far apart from each other, that there's just so much room for all the things.
Yeah. And you always hope that your kids will talk to you and will tell you what's going on, but don't count on that, no matter how close you are.
No. Yeah. The minute it's not cool to talk to your mom and dad anymore, then you're fighting an uphill battle, so just at least be respectfully in the know of what they're up to. Then you have that right. Don't let them think you don't.
Yeah, they will try to tell you that it's my privacy, but I'm sorry, as long as I pay for the phone, I'm going to track the phone and all that stuff. So
yeah. And that's when the intrusive thoughts that involve us come into play. We're like, whatever, I'm keeping you alive.
Well, I think this is an issue we could probably delve even deeper into, but hopefully we gave some pointers that will help somebody listening today. And I think the most important thing is probably just to understand that it's normal.
It's normal. Yeah, that's the one thing I hope we relate, because honestly, they're not great feeling when you have them because they're so extreme, right? But when you have them, you feel like I said, an alien. You're just like, you just want to know that the other person next to you, or maybe the other person on the other side of you, has also experienced that before, and then you're fine, right? You just never want to be the only one who has done it, you know? So
and that it makes you much less likely to talk to other people about it. So just trust that it is normal. And if you do need to talk to someone about it, they probably have gone through exactly the same thing. So no judgment. If you have a great trick for redirecting intrusive thoughts, we would love to hear that. That would probably be very helpful for everybody. If you want to go to our Facebook page, She's a Full-on Monet, and search for the discussion group, you can share that with us there, and we will definitely share it with everyone on this article, because I think this is an important topic, and any tricks we can get are all helpful.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, I sometimes I know that like snapping a rubber band on your wrist, I've heard that snap you back into reality, so to speak. So just doing that, I mean, small little things to just kind of reset, redirect, back into reality is helpful. Any other tricks you may have, definitely share.
I've heard that rubber band trick. I've never tried it though. I've got to see how that works.
I don't like rubber bands on my wrist. Do you remember when we had the store, and a model would show up with a rubber band on the wrist? I just never have one that's either in my hair or my bag. But I know that if you get those, the ones that you can get at the grocery store, the actual rubber bands, those are the ones that could just kind of give you a little,
they give you this little slap.
Yeah. Just a tiny little thin one that you could just hello, snap you right back into reality. That'll do the trick.
Well, thank you guys for joining the discussion today. We appreciate each and every one of you that comes back every time to hear us. And we will see you next time.
Bye.
Bye.
Thanks so much for listening to this week's episode. Don't forget to bookmark our site, she'safullonmonet.com, and subscribe to our newsletter. You can also find us on Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube. If you're enjoying this podcast, it helps us a lot if you can follow, rate, and review. See y'all next week.